Okay. So we were talking about this book, Cherev Nokemet Nekam Brit, which is by Rabbi Breslau, and it's a response to Eile Divrei Habrit, the book of the Hamburg Bezdin. These are the words of the covenant. And the question, is sort of what's he doing here? It's a very strange book. One interesting thing, he begins with this paragraph. And he says, I want you to know this book is for the honor of God and his Torah. It's not to trip anybody up. It's for the honor of our congregation, Beit Yaakov. I'm not sure why he calls it Beit Yaakov. It's not the name of the Reformed synagogue in Hamburg. To separate between light and darkness. They're small and few, those who are trying to quarrel. But the whole congregation is holy. Let me just, I'll be right back 1 second. Now, let me just take a quick look, Sarah. Sorry. Okay. So if you look at the Hamburg Bezdin's book, that's this, right? Eile Divrei Habrit. What you see is the same paragraph. In other words, right, the sort of working theory that we have here is that he's writing a polemic. It's an argument against them, but it's done in a method of satire. So it's not surprising, actually, that he begins with the same paragraph. Well, let's compare them, though. Actually, maybe let me put them side by side. I don't know if you'll be able to see my screen or not, but let's try this. Let's see if we can get this to work. So are you able to see both of these screens?
No. No.
Let me just try resharing. Oh, I have an idea. We'll use a different application. Let's try. Download both of these and we'll open them in something else. Well, okay, let me, I'll just do them both in the same thing here. Okay, let's go back to what we were doing. Okay, you can see. Okay, you can see these two, right? All right.
I don't see anything.
No, no.
Oh, sorry. Okay, let me share my screen. Here we go. Let me go back to how it was. Okay, so so we have Ela Divrei Habrit. We'll just read them line by line. These two beginnings. All right, we have Divrei Habrit. I'm sorry. We have Ela Divrei Habrit and Chervno Kameni Kabrit. Right. So this is the Hamburg Bezin. Zot Ladad. This is to know. Ki hamichtavim halalu. These letters are written l'chavod hakadosh baruch hu b'torato, for the honor of God and His Torah. Now let's look at his first line. Right. Zot Ladad ki hamichtav hazu nitfas l'chavod hakadosh baruch hu b'torato. Same thing. This is to know that this is printed for the honor of God and His Torah. It's certainly not to go against or to anger anybody from the Jewish people. Now, I think that's the same thing. Okay, that's exactly the same. Now, this is the weird thing, right? They say, this is the Hamburg Bezdin talking about our congregation, Kehilat Yaakov. And that may have been the name of their shul in Hamburg, the Orthodox shul in Hamburg. But he basically copies it. It doesn't make any sense because it's not his show. And then they say, Lahodia kimaat hema asher nichshalu that people should know that it's very small, the number of people that have tripped up through this new group. They haven't even reached 1 in 100. All the Jews are holy, and most of them fear God and strengthen the Torah, the written Torah, the oral Torah, and they're very careful about the laws, even the rabbinic laws, as it was since it was established. And it's very small, the number of people that have tripped up through the reform. So they don't say reform, they say those who are trying to trip people up, those who are trying to lead people astray. So now he throws in, the first two lines are the same. Then he says, Lahavdil beina or beina choshech, to distinguish between light and darkness. Now they don't say that here. Right? They say lahodia, to tell you that it's just a small number of people who are trying to change things. So he says to distinguish between light and darkness. Why does he say that? I think because the original book that was written by the reformers was called Oranoga, a light that shines. And so what he's saying is we're the light, and I want to distinguish between light and darkness. And then in their version, they said, for you to know that it's very small, the number of people who have tripped up through this foreign idea. And so he says to know that it's very small, the number interesting, they don't call them wicked, but he calls them wicked. It says they are small and wicked, those who have accidentally tripped and gone out to quarrel. Right, so he's changing it to fit them. He's clearly, this is a criticism of the three rabbis of the Hamburg Bezdin, but it's a paraphrase of their introduction. And they said it's just a very small number, those who have tripped up and gone astray. He says it's a very small number, those who have tripped up and been led astray by those who dwell in darkness. Right, he's setting up this light and dark thing, because he has to argue for something new. And that's very hard. It's much easier in a religious world to argue for that which is old, for that which is traditional. So what he's arguing is that's darkness, this is light. And that when it's dark and we're trying to bring light, that's when the animals come out. It's a quote from from the psalm that we read on Rosh Chodesh, Baruch Nafshi. L'ha'ir lahem haderech, to show them, to light up the way. And then it talks about the sun coming out. So it's different than the same. In other words, it's the introduction to why are we doing this, and he uses the same language for the first two lines, but then where they talk about those who have tripped up and followed those who are leading them astray, but that it's a very small number of Jews, he's clearly referring to them. And what does he say? He can't say they've been led astray. What he says is it's a battle between dark and light, between darkness and shedding light. Right? Obviously, the enlightenment is light. You know, that's and so that's interesting, right? It's paraphrasing, but it's turning it on its head, and he's trying to make an argument, but he's using their language, their metaphors, their pathway, their way. Okay, so right, but he can't write exactly the way they write that. So you know, is this? So what's the purpose of doing it? Here's another paragraph that sort of highlights the way he does things. Shimona Beit Yisrael Kulam, listen to me, the whole Jewish people. Turn to me and put your hand on your mouth. These many years that Hechel HaNegef Ba'am, that a plague has plagued the people. Avad Torah mikohen ve'etzem mizkenim. The Torah has been lost from the Kohen, and advice from the elders. Sarah, you took it out? Yeah. Or said it? The big one? Okay. Ein lanu menahel kayamim harishanim. We don't have a menahel, a guide like we did in the old days. Ish hayashar be'einav yaseh. Today, everybody does what they want. Now, if I quoted these 4 lines and said to you, who's writing this, you know, in the 19th century, you would of course say it's a traditionalist writing against the reformer. But it's not, right? He's a reformer writing against those who are criticizing him. That's so interesting. But if you read it, you would say, you know, I mean, this language of we have no guide, everybody does what they want today, it's kind of crazy. You know, he almost kind of wonders, he like doing this psychological thing where you imitate your persecutor. Rabbim b'nei Yisrael holcho archot eklaklot. And many of the Jews have gone on a way that is bent, and they have forgotten the God who made them, have forsaken the God who made them. They have forgotten Moed v'Shabbat, holidays and Shabbos. At Pi Hashem lo shalu, they don't ask about what God's word is. V'Shmo lo Quran, they don't call in God's name. And they don't see God's face. I mean, this is kind of wild. He's a reformer trying to write against them, and this is what he says. He's sort of accusing the Hamburg Bezdin of not being Jewish enough. I don't know. We have these 3 men in our midst. Who's that? That's the Bezdin. They have eyes and they do not see. They walk in darkness. Yeshno shnat olam v'lo yakitzu. It is a time in the world, maybe a time of forever. That's very hard to forget. Suruchim al arshitam lo nachalu al shever batami. They don't care about the brokenness of our nation. Tashra aretz lifnehem. The earth is dark before them. This is a quote from Eicha. There's a crying out in the daughter of Judah. Ki hofar brit Elokeinu, the covenant of our God has been broken. Now, right, the word brit is a reference, of course, to Eli Divrei Habrit. These are the words of the covenant. That was their book. Asher Chatam Bivsarenu, which was sealed in our flesh, that Abraham made and gave it to Jacob, to the Jewish people. Ve'in ish sam alev, nobody paid attention. Kol gever yarav al chalatzav ki aleda. Now, maybe what he's saying here is the Jews are leaving, in droves, becoming enlightened, and they're not addressing it. Maybe that's what he's trying to say. Ein omer ve'in dvarim b'li tishma kolam. No, nobody's voice is heard. They are crying b'mistarim, in hidden away, they're crying. Right, referring, I guess, to the Hamburg Bezdin. Ha'alo eit lasot lashem. This is a time to do for God. Hefiru. Now the phrase is supposed to end Hefiru Torasecha. There's a line in the prophets. A time to do for God. We have forsaken His Torah. That there's times when you can do certain things that are forbidden in order to save the Jewish people. But He says, "Halo eit lasot lashem." It's time to do for God. Hefiru brito. They have destroyed God's covenant. Right? He changes it from Torah to Brit because he's referring back to Eila Divrei Habrit. These words of the covenant. I think what he's doing is he's accusing the Hamburg Bezdin of closing their eyes to the situation of the Jewish people. They, assume everybody's circumcised. Now, it is true that early on, the Reform movement wanted to stop circumcision. So maybe that's a reference to this. Shimona Hamorim, he says, listen to me, you rebellious ones. This commandment is on you to circumcise. Zod habrita shetishmu. This is the covenant you should keep. Why don't you keep it? You're killing the Jewish people who are not keeping the words of the covenant, who are not keeping the bris. I think what he's saying is, you wrote a book called Eila Divrei Habris. These are the words of the covenant against me, the enlightened one, who's trying to merge enlightenment and traditionalism. And you're not paying attention to the covenant, the bris that's not being kept by the Jewish people, which is circumcision. The Jews are starting to enlighten so much they're not circumcising. And you're not addressing that. I think that's what he's saying. He says, and then he says, and our status among the people has become terrible. Hello, how did this happen? It's your fault, he says. It's from your hands. Because you didn't stand in the breach and shore up the fence. Why have you brought the people to this desert? Right? He's quoting the Jewish people speaking to Moshe. Our people has been, so it's interesting. Like, on the one hand, reform is not very reform yet, but this guy is sort of seeing how it's going, so in a way you could read this in a very positive way, that he's basically rebuking the Hamburg Bezdin and saying, like, why aren't you getting with it, realizing where the people are at and addressing this? That's what we're doing, the reformers. And and the way he writes it, though, is so polemical and so, it's an interesting question. Is this a satire, right? It's just so polemical, and it so reads like a traditionalist writing against the reform. Maybe that's the argument, that it's satire. On the other hand, maybe he's just really angry. Maybe he really thinks that the Reformation is the way to preserve Judaism. It's interesting. So we'll do a little bit more of it in the next few days. All right. Have a good Shabbat, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. To you as well. Bye-bye.